Whilst the dust is still settling around the appointment of Tony Popovic as the new head coach of the Socceroos, it is yet to settle also on the departure of Graham Arnold. He turned up in the media this week and gave a fascinating insight into what led to his decision to step away from the role. We look ahead to the expedited final of the Australia Cup. The Matildas get their mural, but is it the legacy we were really after? Adelaide show us how it's done, both with their football infrastructure and scoring goals for the national team. FA announced their new academy program, and Sydney FC launch a first-of-its-kind Pride membership on this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast, supported by Manscaped. You can use code ROUNDBALL for 20% off and free shipping at checkout. My name is Lachlan Avil, and joining me tonight is Jacob Stevens. Jacob, it has been a good week for South Australian football.
Yeah, there's been some good news coming through. I've just seen Bart Freen's gave an interview as well to the local news here as well, saying that he's almost back ready to play as well, which is good news because he's not seen him since he's signed for the club. So yeah, all things seem to be going pretty well here.
Hello, Christian Montegan as well. We have seen Bart Vreens on one occasion pop up in the media. Rather funny. I can't remember if we mentioned this on the podcast or not, but he posted on his Instagram story and it got spread around of him being fined by SA Police for not wearing a bicycle helmet while he's riding around the city.
They must have different rules where he's from because, that's quite interesting. Did we mention it on the pod? I don't think we did.
I can't remember.
I don't think we have done.
No, I don't think we did. Otherwise, Jacob would go on for 30 minutes. The South Australian police are a disgrace.
Well, of course, the Dutch are a very famous bicycle country, so I'm sure he will be well accustomed to a bicycle. Yeah. Well trusted to ride safely, you'd hope.
You'd hope so.
All right, let's get stuck into the news. We are going to lead off and talk a little bit about Graham Arnold. He made an appearance on Fox Sports' The Back Page during the week and gave an interview and talked about the processes that he came to his decision to step away from the Socceroos. He said he has no regrets. It is about a week now, I think maybe a little bit more since he made the decision. Let it sink in. He still has no regrets about it. He says he's going to take a little bit of a break before thinking about another coaching role or anything else or what comes next. But interesting, Jacob, he was asked about whether we would see him coaching in Australia again. And his response was, quote, "I'd like to go on a new journey." So you can take that two ways. Perhaps he wants to go coach elsewhere. Perhaps it's not coaching at all. Who knows? But I guess we can conclude from that we shouldn't expect him back in the A-League anytime soon.
No, unless he's going to join a different club at the A-League, but it's not really a new journey, is it? So no, I wouldn't expect him to come back. And honestly, I'm in the camp of I don't reckon he'll go coaching anywhere else, at least for a little while. He'll probably take some time off because, look, it can't be an easy job, right? Being an international manager, and particularly when you've got the likes of soccer Twitter breathing down your neck constantly. You can imagine the stresses that would have put him under. So I'm sure he's actually enjoying this little bit of time off and a chance to not have to worry about football for a while. But he's one of those people where, and I think we're all like this, right? We're in football because we love it, and it's difficult to stay away for too long. So yeah, I'd expect to see him back doing something football related, but I don't know if it's going to be coaching. I don't know who would take him on in the first place, and I don't know if he's still got that appetite for him because one of the things that he's come out and said was that he asked himself some tough questions, right? About does he still have that motivation to keep on coaching, to keep on doing what he's doing? Is he excited to go and do things like training? Is he excited to go to the team meetings? And he said that he wasn't, and he told himself that, and that's sort of how he came to this conclusion. So to me, that sort of says that he might actually be a bit fed up with coaching in general, and he's going to look for something else. But he'll stay involved in football in some capacity, I'm sure. But yeah, I think I wouldn't be surprised if it's something that's not coaching.
Yeah, so those questions you brought up, they came from a conversation that Arnold had with Wayne Bennett, very famous rugby league player and coach. Arnie called him up asking for some counsel, and Bennett asked three questions. The first was, when you wake up, are you excited to go to meetings, to trainings? When you look in the players' eyes, are they switched on and are they focused? And if you had a lemon and you squeeze the lemon, is there any juice left in it? A bit philosophical, that last one. But, Arnie answered no to all those three questions, and his decision became quite simple, Christian. But I think this is something we see a lot from coaches when they've been in one specific role for a long time. I don't go quite as far as Jacob, where I would rule him out of coaching completely. I know you're not doing that either, but I think just a little bit of time away, someone like him, you love the game that much, I wouldn't be surprised to see him back in a coaching role sometime next year, perhaps.
Yeah, 100%. I think it takes a bit of time for a manager, especially when you're so attached to a national team. Arnie's been involved in the national team set up with Australia for over 40 years, right? So for him, at the start, I could have imagined that it would have been very difficult for him to realize after that chat with Wade Bennett that, okay, maybe perhaps it is time to step aside. But, like we said in the last podcast, he was selfless, right? He could have easily stayed on and said, okay, I'm the man to take us, to the World Cup and, repeat those 2022 heroics. But instead, it was all too much, to handle in the end. And that's completely fair enough, because as Jacob mentioned at the start, it must be an extremely demanding job at international level to, have to deal with all the scrutiny, not just, from the media, but, social media. It's obviously growing by the day. It's ridiculous now, the amount of criticism you cop on there. Not that Arnie would be, focusing too much on that, but the media in general, I mean, there was a lot of scrutiny aimed at him, and in parts it was pretty fair. With some of his decision making, some of the results went up to par, and Australia is a footballing nation where we expect better results. We expect a certain, we expect certain expectations of ourselves. So, for Arnie, I guess he kept mentioning that it was that gut feeling that, okay, my time's up. And if you feel that, then I think it was only right for him to, hand over the keys to someone else. And I like how Candice Warner, she was one of the members on the panel, and she asked Arnie, was there anyone else that you considered or sort of told the FA that, okay, should you look into this coach to take over? And Arnie's like, I want to be on the back page, not the front page. I thought that was really hilarious. I just laughed for about a good minute straight. But Arnie said it, countless times, that he just needs a rest from the game. He needs a break, time to himself to reflect, and from there, I'm sure he'll get other opportunities elsewhere. And Australia could be an option later down the line. It's just way too early at the moment to say, because there could be, perhaps a big club in the next couple of years who might say, okay, Arnie's available. Can we contact him? We just don't know yet. But for the meantime, Arnie deserves a well-earned rest.
I don't think I've seen Arnie make a joke like that since the Kiwis line, and he made two of them in a 10-minute appearance on TV. So he's obviously on fire. He's obviously chilled out a little bit away from the job.
Yeah.
I just wondered, Jacob, we didn't get your reaction from this whole thing on the last episode. Yeah. Obviously, the transition from Graham Arnold to Popovic, we talked about what the options were last time, but Popper is here now. Do you think that there is enough diversion from that Arnie ball way of playing to Popovic that will inspire the team? Because if Arnold is saying that, we went to training and looked in the players' eyes and they weren't switched on, they weren't focused, is that, specifically a coaching thing? But if you get Popovic who comes in and asks them to play a similar style of football, well, will that stay true?
Yeah, look, I think there's valid concerns that it's going to be a very similar style of football going forwards, and Christian wrote about it for Round Ball Australia. It's up on our website. Did a very good job of it. Actually, the first Talking Tactics piece we put up there, so that's always fun. You to it. But there's definitely similarities. In particular, when the two teams are in possession, it's slow, it's calculated, it's about retaining possession rather than trying to, play too riskily and risk losing it and things like that. And so I think that in terms of what we see on the pitch, there will be differences because every coach has their own sort of philosophical identity and things that they want to do on the pitch. I mean, the fullback usage is going to be different. Popovic, while we've seen at Victory, the fullbacks do get forwards a lot. it was contingent on the ball getting into the attacking third as they were moving up. So they sort of followed the ball up. Whereas with Arnold, it was the fullbacks, especially Geordie Boss when he was in the side, was getting up really early, which meant that they weren't an option in the build-up. Whereas for Popovic's victory, it was the fullbacks were always an option in the build-up, which is why there was a lot of that sort of recycling of possession and negative play, because that was the easy option for them. Whereas in Arnie's, it was going back to the centre backs because the fullbacks weren't an option, sort of thing. So there's going to be slight differences, but I wouldn't expect a massive overhaul of the way that the team plays. And on the point you raised, Lockie, there about sort of player motivation, look, it can be dependent on play style, but I do think that you can have a manager that's really, really good at man management. And Colviert's somebody who comes to mind. I'm not saying he should get the Australia job, as much as I might joke about it in group chats and things like that. But he's somebody who the players love to play for him because he's got their back 100%, you know. And I think that Popovic, from what I know and what I have seen of him, he can have that impact. Think back to his days at the Wanderers, right, when they were first starting out as a club, and how, you know, he galvanized that entire club and culture there, and they had, you know, a great amount of success really early on. I think he could do a very similar thing here. He can come into a team that's perhaps a bit disjointed, disenfranchised and disheartened, and he can lift them back up and give them a bit of a pep in their step. And while they might be playing the same sort of football, it might actually be more effective because they're more invested in it and they're more invested in each other and themselves. So look, you know, it could be similar. It could be, you know, similar but more successful. It could be completely different. We just don't know at this point. But, you know, I think it was getting to a point where a new face was needed. It was getting a bit stale, and, you know, Popovic is who's been chosen now. So we just got to wait and see how that pans out.
One last question on Arnie, Christian, before we move on. Do we have any right to be a little frustrated that he didn't make this call after the Asian Cup? Because he's talked a couple of times now about that defeat to South Korea in the quarterfinals is when this kind of feeling started. He's only had those two competitive games against Bahrain and Indonesia. Oh no, sorry, there was two games maybe from phase 2 of qualification that were after the Asian Cup.
There were the friendlies, weren't there? Yeah,
and then some friendlies, and then these two competitive games in phase 3. Is there anything to say that perhaps if he made that call after the Asian Cup, then we'd be in a better position now?
I mean, obviously hindsight's a great thing, isn't it? I mean, if he walked away after the World Cup, everyone would have been up in arms saying, "No, Arnie, stay with us. Why are you leaving?" And, you know, after the Asian Cup, everyone, you know, called for his head and said, you know, this isn't good enough. But in that present moment, after the tournament ended, obviously Arnold had high expectations, and the team didn't quite deliver, which was obviously disappointing. But I think he was probably sitting there, you know, a couple of weeks after that tournament ended, and thought, you know, he started having those thoughts in his head to say, okay, am I the right man for this job? And I think it's a tad harsh to say, you know, he should have stepped down in that point in time, because tournament football it's so complicated. We've seen Asia, the teams developing, you know, the money invested, the gap's closing, you know, every single year. You know, it's really getting more and more competitive. And we lost to a South Korea side who, let's face it, were one of the favourites to win the tournament. It wasn't like it was an absolute disaster where Australia got knocked out of the group stages or anything like that. So I guess Arnie probably thought to himself, okay, it's perhaps maybe, you know, a one-off. I can turn this thing around. But, you know, when it got to a stage after a few more games thereafter where he sort of saw in the faces of his players that he wasn't getting the same reaction from them as opposed to the World Cup in Qatar, that's when he knew, okay, I've got to step aside now. And sometimes it takes a bit more time than just to say after one tournament, okay, this is it. So, yeah, I think it's a bit harsh to go down that path.
Yeah, I reckon that's probably fair. Football Australia have also confirmed a number of backroom staff changes on Thursday. Assistant coach Renee Mullenstein will depart Football Australia entirely, whilst recently appointed Luke Wilkshire won't be involved in the senior team. Very similar descriptions were also given officially to goalkeeper coach John Crawley, the head of sports science Fabian Ehrman, senior technical analyst Adam Barbara, and media advisor Michael Zapponi as well, Jacob. So Tony was very non-committal when asked about his backroom staff. Apparently those plans have moved very quickly in the days that followed, but it does appear like a clean out of that staff is coming and some new people, new faces will come in.
And I mean, is that surprising to anybody, really? I mean, it happens at club level, right? You bring in a new coach and they want to have their people around them and want to set up in their way. It's going to be similar with an international side as well. It's a lot that's happened quickly, and especially after statements, really non-statements by Popovich, like you mentioned there, Lockie. So it's sort of, in terms of the quickness of it, has come by surprise, but I don't think the fact that there has been this many departures is particularly surprising, at least not to me. This is where I was saying before, we just don't know yet whether there will be, these big changes to things on the pitch, but these are the areas where, things like the assistant coach, other coaching positions and backroom staff and things, you bring in the right people and you can see a change on the pitch. It's not all dependent on the head coach and the guy who's answering all the questions in the media and is copying all the flack. There's a lot of people behind him doing a lot of work as well. So, I think that this is an area where if he brings in the right people, there's definitely a chance to see some changes on the pitch as well. But yeah, just quite a bit of a clean out, like you said, Lockie. Sometimes it's needed. I think we'd all agree that it felt a little bit like the team had stagnated and it was getting a bit stale. So again, a chance to bring in some fresh faces and hopefully bring back some motivation just around the camp there, because it does seem like things really started to plateau a bit. And of course, the Michael Zappone one is interesting. Of course, some of the comments the question that he asked in a press conference, or was it on the pitch or whatever, last year?
On the pitch post game
to Tony Popovich. So I wonder if maybe that one has come back to bite him there. But no, a few changes, and I'm not entirely surprised to see that this has happened.
Yeah, a quick turnaround isn't a surprise though. I mean, considering that the game is less than 3 weeks away, the China game, I think it's a way of Popovich saying, okay, I want to stamp my authority really early, and I want my own people. This is my way of doing things. These are the people who I trust, and I can sort of delve ideas off and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, the quick turnaround isn't too much of a major surprise there, because he really has to get to work, doesn't he? He doesn't have much time to play. He really has to get people together in the backroom staff to really sort out what he wants to do and implement his ideas going forward.
And of course, the beauty of this is that we're only 2 weeks away, literally 14 days as we record this on Thursday night. So I'm sure Popovich doesn't see it that way. I'm sure he'd like a little bit of extra time. But for us, a lot of those questions, especially around player selection, which is going to be intriguing. Popovich has his own players. He has a history of bringing players along through clubland with him. It'll be interesting to see if that continues into the national team as well. But before then, we have the Australia Cup final coming up on Sunday evening, 7 p.m. Or 7:10, I should say, on a Sunday in Melbourne, to navigate a rather busy weekend of sports in the sporting capital of the country, perhaps the world. Might leave that one there. The NRL prelim final on Friday night, AFL Grand Final Saturday, Australia Cup final on Sunday. Christian, I'll strategically come to you first on this one. What a lineup.
Yeah, what a lineup. Melbourne Storm don't think so with their post today on social media, but we'll say that for another day. But no, if you're talking about just solely in terms of the game, obviously victory come in, you'd have to say is massive favourites considering Bellegermain suspension. Puli would say really silly of him, which I agree with. No need for that second yellow card. He's put his team in a really difficult position now. Where does MacArthur find the solutions up front in that number 9 role? They just don't have anyone really in that focal point where I can see them making any sort of inroads. I think victory is going to dominate, most of the possession. MacArthur will probably look to try and sit back and hit on the counter. But against this victory side, I've been really impressed with them. They've been clicking really well. The midfield two of Ryan Teague and Valadon, they've been really impressive the past few competitive games, the way they've, come in sync, connecting between the midfield and the forwards. So there's a lot of positive signs of victory. Even Virgos as well. There were some doubts the first couple of games that he appeared in. Okay, is he going to be another one of these foreign flops? But in the past couple of games, he's proven that he can match it and he can add something really valuable to this victory offense. So yeah, there's a lot of variables going into it. Obviously, Kisnorbo, new coach, he'll desperately want a first trophy at the club. Just to settle, I guess, the doubts coming in. Obviously coming from Melbourne City a couple seasons ago, there's a bit of unrest with the fans to say, okay, how is this one going to turn out? But if he can get this victory against Macarthur and lift the cup before the opening round of the new season, that will be such an ideal start for him. It will just ease a bit of pressure off him heading into that campaign. So looking forward to it, but I don't see Macarthur. I see him putting up a fight, but I just don't see him hanging around with victory until the end. I don't know about you guys, but yeah, that's just how I see it.
I can't believe I gave you a free pass to go in on the reputation of Melbourne as a sporting city, and you didn't want it. You threw it away. You just went straight into the game. Didn't even want it. All right. Well, Jacob, let's go to you then. Apparently, we're talking about football now, which is, I guess, what we're here to do.
That's kind of the point of the podcast.
It is the point of the podcast.
That's what I thought the point was.
Then you called the no sharing violation on me, did you? Okay. Look, it's always dangerous to ride off a team going into any game of football, let alone a cup final. But you would have to say that, as Christian says, Melbourne Victory do have to be the favourites against Macarthur without Valencia, man. We talked about this on the YouTube preview we did, but, it's been a long time since the Macarthur Bulls have played without Ulysses Davila and Valencia Main in the team, two players who absolutely carried them at times last year. It's going to be very interesting to see what they can come up with without those two players.
To be honest, I think they'd have struggled even with him in the team. Just to be perfectly honest, like Victory look a class above most other teams so far that we've seen. Obviously, Sydney FC looked very, very good in their Champions League 2 game the other day. And the Mariners are the Mariners, so don't write them off yet either. But the Victory, of those three, probably have had the strongest performances that we've seen so far, consistently strong as well. And I don't expect that to change coming into the final here, which, from an Adelaide perspective sucks, because that means Victory are going to go to 3 cups as well. Adelaide on 3 cups. So it's the two old rivals as the two most successful teams in the competition. I'm saying this like it's a done deal. It's obviously not. And as you mentioned, it's silly to write off a team already, but it does seem like a bit of a foregone conclusion. And maybe that plays into Macarthur's hands though, right? Perhaps Victory get a bit complacent, or perhaps it gives Macarthur something, to go, everybody's writing us off. We've seen it happen the last couple of seasons. We saw it happen with Marconi. Obviously we're using one of, was it Paletti's predictions?
YouTube video.
That's right. To motivate themselves, and Italiano used something similar with the Phoenix last season as well. So I don't know. Maybe Macarthur are going to do the same and go, look, nobody's giving us a chance here, so we've got to go out and prove that we deserve to be here. And
just before you move on to that, out of all the coaches that would potentially use some media to motivate their team, surely Mile Stajovski has to be on the rock bottom of that list. Surely he does not care at all.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Sorry, continue.
What's YouTube?
Yeah.
But no, I mean, but just general chatter though is going to be going around, and that could be a thing. But no, it does seem like the Victory at the strongest side. It'll still be an entertaining game because it's a cup final, and cup finals are always good fun to watch because you just don't know what's going to happen, and it's what everybody's played for, is to get to that point. But yeah, it does seem like it's going to be a Victory win, and going to set them up nicely as well for the coming season. Because if Victory can claim silverware already before the season started, there's going to be a huge morale boost and go, we can do this. Like, we came so close last season. We can push on. We've got a stronger squad. We've got a new coach in, we can do this and we can go all the way. So, Victory are looking scary. But Macarthur have been good in the cup in recent years. Obviously, won it a couple of years ago against Sydney United in the final. So, maybe they're the new cup specialists, and we're just starting to come into the Macarthur era of Australian Cup dominance. Who knows? Who knows? But we'll find out on Sunday.
We will. Yeah, look, I think it would be massive for Macarthur if they could pull this off and get that second win in 3 years. It would be massive for Victory and everything they're trying to do this season. It's a tick for this squad, of which they've retained a majority off from what was already a good team last year. It's a tick for Patrick Kusnorbo, who has succeeded at every point in asking so far in his very short reign. It's a tick to qualify for the Asians Champions League 2 next season, which for a club like Victory, they will have aspirations, particularly in that competition, just like Sydney FC should this year. It is a step up from the format of the AFC Cup that the Mariners won, but it's a decent competition now, slightly harder, but Australian teams should be still targeting to win it. And that comes in this new era of Asian football with better rewards, better prize money, and then, the opportunity to qualify for the Champions League Elite and then the Club World Cup. So, big ticks for Melbourne Victory if they were to get this win on the weekend. I do also want to just give a quick congratulations to Central referee Jonathan Barrero, who will be assisted by Ashley Beecham and Arvin Shanmuganathan. It's special in the Australia Cup. Referees are only allowed to do each role once for an Australia Cup final, like is the tradition all over the world. So congratulations to them. This is their year. Let's head up to the Northern State because the Queensland government has unveiled the Matildas mural at Suncorp Stadium, commemorating that magical penalty shootout victory against France in the quarterfinals of the World Cup. We'll get to the legacy issue in a second, but firstly, I want to ask the question. Am I the only one that doesn't think it looks that great? Like
so bad.
It's not really what I had in mind.
No, when you look at it, you think, how is this complementing this legacy, and how is this supposed to be a good thing? Like, you can't really distinguish. Is this actually the Matildas? Like, no. I thought it was going to be a real, representative mural that you could really see and think, okay, this captures the Matildas. But when you look at it, you think, no, I'm just not a fan of it. I'm with you, Lockie.
Even one of those spray painted ones would have looked better.
Oh, yeah. They look amazing.
At least there would have been colour, and you could, like you said, Christian, see that it's the Matildas. Like
even the facial expressions, like you can't pick which play is which, and it's a bit all confusing.
All right.
Also, I've seen some criticism of it because it's like, we got a mural celebrating.
It's been quite
fourth place finish, and
on social media. Social media, it's been quite 50-50 though. I've seen some people say, they like it. I'm thinking, what are you seeing that I'm seeing?
Well, there is a lot of different camps, right? There's people that, as you just said, like, they've finished fourth. What do they deserve a mural for? Those are mainly not football people that don't understand the significance of it. There's people like us who don't understand which creative director would have chosen to go down that
why
route.
It looks so bad.
Why it looks so bad. But there's also the route, and I think this is most of the football community as well, that questions the real legacy behind this tournament and, what we'd really want to see coming out of the World Cup last year. And it's a question that Paletti wrote about on the site as well. And it's, what is the legacy that we did want from this? And the obvious answer is infrastructure and development and planning for the future of the game and allowing the next generation of Socceroos and Matildas, prosperity as well as the A-Leagues. And, Perry Park is the obvious example that keeps getting brought up in Queensland, Jacob. It's sitting there. It's still in need of an upgrade, and it sits patiently waiting as what would be a wonderfully suitable home base for Brisbane Roar for most of their games. They might take the big ones to Suncorp still, but for Brisbane Roar, for potentially NPL clubs, NST games as well, it just seems like such an obvious solution. And even with the Brisbane Olympics coming up and all this money going into infrastructure development, it still seems to be consistently looked over.
Seems a bit tokenistic, doesn't it? It's a case of, people are calling for it, so we'll do it because it'll make people happy, without realizing that the thing that would actually really make people happy is proper investment into the sport, because this isn't as nice as the gesture is. It's not helping anyone, right? Like, it's not helping people get into the sport. It's not helping people in the sport stay in the sport. It's not helping.
They can stare at it for long enough to say, okay, I might play football now.
Long enough to figure out what's going on in there.
Yeah, that's right. It'd be there a while, but it is a bit of a shame. It feels like just the easy move to make, and call me a conspiracy theorist if you want, but that seems like the sort of thing to garner a bit of support with that election coming up. So it would be so nice to see investment. But as I think I touched on, not in the last episode because I wasn't on it, but the last episode I was on, just sports in general in Queensland at the moment is a bit of a mess and a bit of a basket case, and there doesn't seem to be any real direction, especially with 2032 coming up and the need for investment and infrastructure for that. And there just doesn't seem to be a whole lot of talking going on between sports and governing bodies and the government. So it's not massively surprising, but it's incredibly disappointing because it just seems like such an easy way to be popular. Ignoring doing a mural at the stadium is to just put some money into the game in Queensland on the back of the World Cup, and people would have been going, that's the right move, well done. It wouldn't have cost a huge amount. I mean, football already receives a hell of a lot less funding, especially in Queensland, than a lot of other sports. Even just a little bit would have done a lot. And so, it's just incredibly disappointing that still football is fighting for relevance. It's fighting for funding that it should just already be getting. Like, there shouldn't be a question or a discussion that we're having about why isn't it getting funding for the women's game after the success of the World Cup? Because any normal nation in the world would go, yeah, that's the right move, and we're going to do that. And we've seen it with places like, I want to say Uzbekistan has been just putting a bunch of money in because they've seen how successful some of their youth sides have been in international tournaments, and that's going to make those youth teams better, but it's going to make the domestic tournaments in Uzbekistan better, which means that their players are going to get better in Uzbekistan. They don't have to go overseas for opportunities. Just so many benefits to it. I mean, other countries are doing this. Why is Australia still so averse to football? Like, is the stigma still really there? There goes that word.
They don't believe in the potential. That's why. That's a simple answer.
But why do they not believe in it? Like,
because there's other sports to compete with. This is even going back with the Australian government. Remember how they sent out the package after during the Women's World Cup to say, okay, this is your reward, this is the investment. But there was like 10 other sports who shared, that funding with. It's like, hold on a minute, football has just come off this successful World Cup. It's the Matildas who've, spearheaded record numbers, TV audiences, sellout crowds, and we've got to share with 10 other sports. That doesn't happen in a country like Uzbekistan, for example. So that's another.
So let me just come in here, because that grant was specifically for women's sport as well. So that consideration does have to be made. But I think it is important that when we talk about government funding, you do have to look inward a little bit. And football has absolutely received less than its fair share in government funding. But we also have to think about what we can do better. And what we absolutely can do better as a national game is be unified and come together with one plan and one direction and make it explicitly clear to government what we want. And, we talk about it so much, but the fact that there are so many different factions pulling their own way, and, that's not necessarily the wrong thing to do, because people have to take care of their own self-interest. But let's try unify ourselves as much as we can to make sure that those self-interests are the same things, and so everyone is naturally pushing the same direction. So I don't think it's quite as simple as you make it out to be, Christian, but there definitely is issues there. I'll ask you one more question, Christian, to close on this conversation. Do you think that the opportunity for legacy is now lost on this FIFA Women's World Cup?
Yes and no, because I say, no, because it's very hard to say, because there have been improvements, and in terms of investment with women's change rooms, for example, at grassroots level, we're getting more young girls playing the sport, but at the same time, there's not enough investment in there to, I guess, collectively, bring in a lot of girls, because there's still girls that are missing out on, being able to participate because the numbers are so high. Football was already the most participated sport in Australia before the Women's World Cup, and that rose, I think, I forgot the figure at the top of my head, I think it was like 20% or something.
20% like sign-ups, yeah, and team sport, yeah, most played team sport.
Yeah, so I mean, and you look at it now, and the investment, yes, it has improved, but there's still a gap there, right? And I guess now that the Women's World Cup, it's been over a year now since it's passed. I guess the opportunity is lost there a bit to, again, capture the imagination of people, because it's in that moment where you've got to have a plan in place and really execute it. Because if you don't, if you miss that mark, then that ship could sail. Not to say that the FA haven't done its part in the initiatives and the investment, all that stuff, but there are a few gaps there that they could have done things differently. But yeah, again, hindsight's always a great thing.
What will be a really interesting test to try and answer that question is the games that are played in Australia by the Matildas now after the Olympics, after a poor performance at a tournament. What is it like when the Matildas perhaps aren't playing that well? As part of this announcement up in Queensland, FA also announced a couple more friendlies, one against Switzerland in Switzerland, which will be the second game of that October window where we're also playing Germany. And then a Queensland double against Brazil as well over November, December, which will be played at Suncorp and the Gold Coast Jacob. So it's those games for me. They're the ones that the two games against Brazil, that's going to be the first test back on home soil since the Olympic Games. The team have played plenty in Queensland over the last couple of years. Big boost, of course, that game at Suncorp against France. I wonder what it will be like now that they've had a few poor performances.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting test case, but they're also coming up against Brazil, who have been sort of, I suppose, one of the powerhouses of women's football for quite a while, alongside, the likes of the US. So, against a bit of a pedigree opposition, hopefully some, a big draw card for people to go playing against Brazil, right? It's not playing against, the Philippines or, all due respect to them. Like it's the sort of country that's going to bring people to the game to watch. So, hopefully that helps out a little bit as well. But look, I think people still love the Matildas. I think they'll go to the games, and that's where, I'm not completely lost that the whole idea of a legacy is gone. I think that there's still the chance for it. But like you said, Lockie, it's going to depend on if people do turn up for this game, and it's going to be, like blatantly obvious to us if people aren't turning up to these games that it was this sort of one opportunity to capture that, and it's gone. But we can't be completely negative already, says the person who's typically the most negative in this podcast. And let's hope that, they get good crowds and they've still got that good support. And from a footballing perspective as well, some games that are going to be really good tests. Switzerland and Germany are two strong European sides. As I said, Brazil have been one of the top women's sides for a long, long time. So, they're testing themselves still against good opposition, and, maybe it's a case of they still back themselves to be able to play well and put these teams to the sword. And, they'll shake off the sort of Olympics, not with, a few easier games to try and recalibrate themselves, but to continue to push themselves and test themselves. I think that shows a bit of character, and hopefully we get to see some good games and some good football and some good crowds as well.
I do just want to clarify as well. I think I phrased that question poorly around legacy, because it's not a binary answer, right? It's not like there is a legacy or there isn't. Clearly there has been something. It's just to what extent do you capture that opportunity, and maybe some of that opportunity has been lost. But if we look, towards South Australia, who right now are the glistening example of infrastructure development, because Hindmarsh Stadium has just completed its $53.5 million upgrade. The renovations include freshly laid, upgraded turf, which it has a new irrigation system, new drainage system, artificial turf on the side of the pitch to protect it for warm-ups and stuff like that. 15 extra replay screens, safe standing for the active support in 2 bays for the Red Army as well. Christian, it's already considered as probably the best football stadium in the country, definitely when it comes to A-League competition, and that stadium is getting upgraded to another level.
Yeah, and much to Jacob's, I guess, pleasing or happiness, or however you want to describe it. I mean, if they didn't sign Ben Falami, it could have been more investment pumped in, maybe, an extra few dollars in there. Just, but no, this is definitely a much welcomed move for Cooper Stadium, because you rightly mentioned, Lockie. For me, anyway, it's probably. Even Suncorp Stadium. I think when Suncorp Stadium is full, I think that's the best rectangular football stadium Australia has in this country, and I'd go even as far as with Socceroos games. But Cooper Stadium is just that great, unique atmosphere where it's really compact. It's the kind of these boutique stadiums that a lot of clubs in the A-League really desperately do need. Unfortunately, again, the investment is an issue. But for Adelaide, at least they're taking the initiative and on the front foot about this. And I can't see see how it all ends up, and the redevelopments hopefully will lead the club in a good stead.
Yeah. Now, of course, I looked for a breakdown of where this money came from. It doesn't appear to be publicly available at the moment. We'll try and chase that down. But obviously, there is help from government and council in here, Jacob.
Mm-hmm.
Christian makes an interesting point. I did preface it with best A-League stadium because obviously when you get Suncorp full, when you get Amy Park full, I went to see the Sydney Football Stadium when it was rebuilt for the Women's World Cup. That was an amazing stadium as well when it's full. But when you get those regular, is it maybe 12, 13,000, something like that at Highmarsh Stadium, they fill it out most weeks. It consistently rates high on player surveys in terms of atmosphere and quality. So, encouraging.
Yeah, I think the thing with Hindmarsh is, and anybody who's been to a game there will know what I mean, is how steep it is. Like you can be 5-6 rows back and you're closer to the pitch than I was in the first row at Amy Park in the away bay, right? Like you're on top of the players at all time. It's incredible, and you feel really close to the people around you, which sort of builds that atmosphere, and that's why it's always consistently ranking so high, is because it feels like, even though it only holds 16,000, it feels a lot bigger. It's simply because of that, because the crowd are just on top of the pitch at all times. All the noise is sort of directed towards the pitch. And these upgrades with the safe standing, it's probably been quite a long time coming, I'd expect. It's not like the Red Army have been sitting down all these years waiting for it and standing up anyway. So now they've got a chance to do it with, the help of some protective railing as well, which will make things, that little bit safer for them, which is nice, and a chance to hang some banners up and stuff on that, and add a bit of colour to the stand, which will be cool. 15 extra replay screens. That was a big thing that was lacking, was that they had the two big ones in either corner of the ground, and then these tiny little TVs at the bars, one at each bar, which, would get crowded around and you couldn't see what was going on anyway. So, that's good. But one thing that I'm really annoyed isn't on there is upgraded bathrooms, because those are always an absolute nightmare. I know that's a nightmare at every stadium everywhere, right? But they're really bad at Hindmarsh. Like it's a case of, if you don't leave 5 minutes before halftime, you're not getting back until the 60th minute sort of thing. Like the lines are huge. So that would have been nice to see that. But no, it's fantastic that Hindmarsh is continuing to get these upgrades, especially off the back of such a massive one with the roof over the other stand recently with for the Women's World Cup. I think this might be, I'm not 100% sure, I think this might be a continuation of some planned upgrades from that they couldn't necessarily get done in time for the Women's World Cup. At least that's what I think might be the case. Obviously, we'll have to look into it a bit more and find out. But it's awesome to see. And South Australia football has its own problems. I think one of the things that it's always done well is representing itself on the national level, whether that's with the teams that it puts out there and competes with, or with this sort of infrastructure spending. So, it's always good to see this sort of stuff coming through.
Well, continuing on that theme, the young Socceroos have gotten off to a brilliant start in their Under-20 Asian Cup qualification group. Largely due to Adelaide and South Australian players, Luka Jovanovic and Pana Kikiadis, both with braces in the respective 2-0 wins over Afghanistan and Macau. Jacob, I'll come back to you. Jovanovic, you can probably see coming from a mile away, but Kikiadis on the brace.
Yeah. Well, did you see his second goal as well?
It was great.
I mean, good signs for the season ahead for Adelaide, perhaps there with those two. I mean, Jovanovic has always been a good goal scorer. Even for Australian sides, he's been on the score sheet. I just don't know what to say. And it's weird that South Australia is continuing to develop this sort of talent consistently. It's not like it's coming through one every couple of years. It's been the same for 5 or so years now, in terms of this South Australian talent coming through into the national teams and through those pathways, and making a name for themselves in the A-League as well and things like that. So it's awesome to see, and I think it comes back to what I was saying about South Australia just has always seemed to do, has always had a good image for itself in football nationally. And I think it's, this sort of us against them thing, in that we're kind of this small state. when it comes to football, because we're close to the eastern states, have a tiny percentage of the population compared to them. So it does almost feel like we've got to do a bit extra to make sure that people know who we are, sort of thing. And perhaps that plays into it maybe a little bit. I don't know. But no, it's awesome to see. And it's well deserved for the pair of them. Jovanovic continues his goal scoring form at the national level, which is great. And Kikianis, this will give him hopefully a big boost of confidence heading into the season, because there's going to be a lot of pressure on him with the defensive stocks that Adelaide have. He's going to need to start a lot of games this season, and he's not had a huge amount of experience at the A-League level. So to be able to get a brace here and go, right, I can do this. I know what I'm doing. Like, I can score goals for a centre back. Like, come on, I'm making it look easy. So hopefully he can do the same during the season.
Maybe you don't have any centre backs after all.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he's going to be up front now.
All right. Well, the young Socceroos do have a tougher test coming up in their next game against Saudi Arabia on Monday morning Australian time. That will likely decide top of the group of the 5 teams in that group, and an automatic place for the Under-20 Asian Cup. The loser of that game, if they finish second, will have to be one of the 5 best placed runners-up out of 10 groups. Chuck in a host, and that's how you get your 16-team tournament in China next February. We're going to take a quick pause. When we come back, Football Australia's new controversial academy program. Now, just before we wrap up the show, obviously on this podcast, we like our balls round, but we also like them nice and tidy, which is why we have partnered with Manscaped. Manscaped were kind enough to send us some of their latest and greatest products and are also giving you, our audience, a 20% discount and free shipping if you use the code ROUNDBALL on their website at checkout. First up is your round ball's new best friend, the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra.
Now, Lockie, I haven't met anyone who isn't a fan of a trimmer, so say goodbye to your low pass completion percentage, and this trimmer gets it right the first time, cutting through the lowest of defensive blocks with style, without taking any unforeseen deflections. With 2 interchangeable skin-safe blade heads, you can choose between a precise trim or a smooth finish. And it's waterproof, just like a Route 1 Targetman hoofball setup. You can play the same system in the wet with no worries at all.
Sometimes, however, the lineup needs to be rotated to meet the challenges of different opposition, which is why the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra also contains the Weed Whacker 2.0. The Weed Whacker is a versatile option above the shoulders. It does some of its best work out in wide areas, taking on defenders 101 and eliminating those pesky ear hairs. But it also has the ability to weave inside and trim teams apart in central areas, floating in between the double pivot, to sniff out a chance on goal.
After a hard-fought game, recovery is important, which is why the Performance Package also comes with the anti-chafing Crop Preserver deodorant and Crop Soother aftershave lotion to ensure you're ready to go come the weekend. So if you want to join the 11 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped for all their grooming needs, then head online and use the code ROUNDBALL for 20% off. Thank you to Manscaped for supporting our show, and just know that by heading to the Manscaped website and using code ROUNDBALL, you're directly supporting our coverage of Australian football. Football Australia is partnering with 4 member federations to pilot what they are describing as a nationally aligned academy program called the Football Australia Academy. The program that will commence in October is in collaboration with Football West, South Australia, Tasmania and Victoria. Its aim is to ensure talented young male and female players have access to highly skilled coaches. As well, FA will work alongside FIFA and the AFC to formalise Australian coaching accreditations as globally recognised qualifications, which has been an issue for Aussie coaches overseas. Christian, I remember that iconic radio conversation with someone in Scotland when Ange Postecoglou first got the Celtic job, and he was talking about, he was reading a report about the fact that the move had been delayed because they didn't respect Ange Postecoglou's AFC coaching badges, and they all thought he was a bit of a laughing stock back then. We know what's happened since, but that has been an issue. So there is the coaching side to this, but then the other question, which is controversial in a lot of club circles around the country, is who actually should be in charge of developing young players. Should there be an emphasis on these national programs, or should FA leave it to the clubs to develop their players?
It's a tricky question, isn't it? Obviously, with players being mostly associated with their clubs, you'd you'd probably say the clubs, but at the same time, I think Australian football, whenever it's been successful in the past, whether that be the golden generation, for example, it's always had one vision aligned, one footballing program. Whereas in this one, it's sort of I guess spread out a bit, where we don't really know an identity. I mean, Ernie Merrick has been in charge of, I guess, all that sort of stuff, but even there's been suggestions that it's been difficult for him to get his ideas across and everyone be on the same page. So from that perspective, it can be really tricky when a lot of different people want their own ideas to be formed, and you don't get that one full flow on effect. Yeah, it's interesting. What do you guys think? Because if I had to choose, I'd probably lean towards the national setup, first and foremost, and then the clubs, because players move around different clubs, especially now with young players moving overseas early, trying to get that opportunity. A-League seeing an opportunity for getting a bit of profit for transfers overseas, a couple million or so. It's a tricky one.
At least here in South Australia, we've seen a good balance of both, to be honest. We've got the FSA NTC, the National Training Centre here, which is the Football South Australia squad of players that they bring on to develop, and they've had some great players come through and go on to A-League and overseas and things like that. You've also got the clubs here have always done a good job of developing the talent. Adelaide United obviously have their youth team is the NPL side, where a lot of their talent pipeline comes from. So, we've seen a good balance of it here in South Australia, and I think it's a difficult one, right? Because you'd love for it to be clubs and it just be centralized and it's all in this one place. But if the clubs aren't doing it, you need somebody to step in and sort of give these players a chance. And it's a difficult one. It's about finding that balance, I think, because you can't be all in one way or the other. I don't reckon that's at least not in the sort of football environment we have in Australia. I don't think that that's a smart move. So I do like that there's sort of this unification of ideas with a few of these state bodies coming in to sort of try and bring a single approach to it. Hopefully maybe that'll make things a little bit easier, and it might even give some of these clubs a bit of a kick to go, right, we're clearly not doing enough because Football Australia and our state body has decided that they need to step in to help out. So, hopefully that will raise their level as well. Could obviously go the other way though. The clubs could get complacent and go, well, they don't trust us to develop our own players, so we're not going to, sort of thing. It goes both ways. I would like to see a balance, and like I said, we've been lucky here in South Australia to have that balance, and I think it shows that it can work. But it's down to the players as well, because some are going to thrive more in clubs and some are going to thrive better in these programs where it's tailored specifically to their development. Because that's the thing, right? A club has a bunch of different players to worry about all at different stages in their careers. Whereas, one of these programs is going to be focused on these young developing players, and it's going to tailor everything towards them. So, some players might feel more comfortable and feel that they develop better in that sort of an environment, and others are going to prefer the challenge of having to take onus and responsibility for themselves. When we spoke to Alessandro Ciccati on the pod, he was saying that, he's a young player in a side where there's, a lot of other young players, but there's some good veteran presences as well. And he has to take the initiative to go to the coaches and say, I want to improve. I want to do this and this and this. And he has to take that step. And some players thrive with that, whereas others prefer to sort of be guided in that early stage of their career. So I think having options is good. Having a balance is good. And we'll see how it plays out. But Christian, you was it Christian or Lockie that mentioned that there's been a couple of issues with Ernie Merrick trying to get his ideas across and get everybody on the same page. So hopefully he can do that, because from what we've seen, he's had some pretty nice ideas, or at least what looks good on paper. And this looks good on paper as well. I must say I'm a big fan of it.
I think there is lots of different levels to it, and depending on what kind of rung you are in the ladder, I think there's different questions to be asked about what the motivations of the different players are here. So we have situations like, I know for a fact, I don't know I'm not across the full Australian NPL landscape, but definitely in Victoria, the women's program, they have a women's academy that play in NPL. We have in Queensland, they have a number of academies where it essentially acts as a club and you play on the weekend in the FQ academy, and it may be similar in different places around the country. I'm not sure where that sits with me, because they're not a national team where they need to, have talent ID and have a plan for future national teams. They're not a club where they're building them up for the first team. What kind of registration fees do they charge to participate in these kinds of academies? That's another question as well. So I'm not sure if that's probably the best solution. What's been described, at least by Ernie Merrick in the press release for this FA program, is a lot of it is about talent ID and recognition. And I think as a national body, that is part of your obligation to set processes and systems in place. And this comes back to a FIFA report that was released a few months ago as well, to make sure you're doing your due diligence and really getting around to all these different places to ensure that, talented youngsters have the opportunity just to be seen, not necessarily be coached intensively by Football Australia, but just have that opportunity to be seen so they can be scouted and recognised and brought into those junior national teams, which is an established part of football development all over the world. So that's probably closer to where I think is the more comfortable solution. But yeah, Christian, it's a Pandora's box, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And we haven't even mentioned the coaching yet and that impact, because you mentioned Ange, how he struggled at the start with that AFC license. And we've seen a lot of Australian coaches, go overseas and, sort of make a name for themselves, and I guess, scrap that taboo of, okay, Australian coaches aren't capable of, proving themselves overseas, which is, it's not true anymore. We've seen Kevin Muscat's the latest example, doing so well in Asia, looking to get that move to Europe. So, there's a few things that I guess align for both the coaches and the players, but you're right, Lockie. There's a few, there's different elements to it where there are pros and cons to it. It's just, like I said, being on the same page and getting that plan in place, because if it's not, then it gets really prickly very quickly.
All right, finally, Sydney FC have launched the first ever A-League's Pride membership. The membership, which can be standalone or added on to an existing membership, costs $55. It gets you free entry to the club's Pride event, a Sydney FC Pride pin, limited and pre-accessed Pride merchandise, $40 worth of credit for the members store, amongst of a host of other regular membership benefits. Seems quite good value for money. Paletti couldn't be with us here tonight, but they have something to say here.
So my thoughts on the Pride membership are glowingly and overwhelmingly positive, which I'm sure that anyone who knows me would understand that that's absolutely not a shock at all. I'm glad that Sydney FC have taken this step. I think that in the launch and the announcement of it, there are a couple of things that could have been done better, not just by Sydney FC, but also by the A-Leagues and their social media accounts, in shutting off comments on all platforms, because we know that, trolls and anonymous people, they feel emboldened to come out of the woodwork with these sorts of things. And, so I feel that could have been done a little bit better. But overall, I think the membership is overwhelmingly positive. I think the implementation of it as well, with the Pride pin. And, if you have a look at the media release, said Sydney FC encourages members who, purchase this add-on membership, encourage them to wear the Pride pin at home games, so that you can find, other members, other, people who are coming to the football first time, and go, okay, this is a safe person for me to come and sit next to. And, because I've been at Sydney FC games and I have seen, homophobic behavior firsthand, slurs, you name it. And it's because we know that a lot of people feel more emboldened in a sporting environment, no one's going to care. And that's not the case. And so, to have that visible display of support where it's like, okay, I'm coming to a Sydney FC game for the first time. I don't know where the friendly people are, essentially. And I use that term in the sense of, okay, where are people who are like me that I can come to the football with and sit down and, enjoy the game with, where I can feel safe, because ultimately that's what it is. We want fans to feel safe, particularly newer fans to the game, but just fans in general. It's all about feeling safe and, and identifying that sense of community. And so, on that front, I think the way that they're going about implementing this is brilliant. Overall, I think it's absolutely fantastic. I think, and inevitably you've got these comments, as I said, from these trolls and these homophobes who feel bold, and it's like, well, why do we need this? Why do we need a pride round? Why do we need a pride membership? It's because of people like you that things like this are necessary. No one's forcing you to purchase this. No one's forcing you to participate in this optional membership add-on. It is an optional add-on. No one's forcing you to participate, okay? If you don't like it, don't purchase it. No one's forcing your hand to anything, right? And I think the more people that could understand that, the better it is. So I'm going to get too angry, and I'm going to pop a vein or something if I keep going along that line. Overall, as a queer person, I consider it to be incredibly and extremely positive. I champion Sydney FC for their efforts. I thank them for their efforts with this. I'm very much looking forward to, receiving my pride pin. Overall, great. Absolutely love it. I think just one more thing as well. I think the idea that it's not just the pride pin. You've also got, they're running a Pride event in October, and purchasing the Pride membership gets you free entry to that. I think just, all these little extra initiatives they're doing is fantastic to go along with it. It's not just, this whole idea of rainbow capitalism, because we know that's a thing. This is a genuine, heartfelt thing from Sydney FC to to be welcoming and inclusive of the LGBTQIA community, as well as the announcement of Sydney FC they're going to debut their Pride kit this season in a doubleheader against, I want to say it was the Wellington Phoenix. I cannot wait for it to go on sale. I will be purchasing 2. Just as long as they release a goalkeeper kit to go along with it, so I can get outfield jersey and I can get the goalkeeper kit like what Wellington Phoenix did last year, I'd be absolutely fantastic for that. In fact, just give me all the Pride kits. If anyone just wants to give me all of the Pride kits, please do, so that it'll save me a couple of $1,000. Overall, top shelf, absolutely love it, and can't wait to see more of it in action.
All right, that will do for this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. Thank you very much to Manscaped for supporting our show. You can use code ROUNDBALL, that's it, ROUNDBALL for 20% off on the Manscaped website. There we go, that's the right way around.
Don't try it the other way around.
No, don't go to our website. We got nothing to sell you at the moment. All right, Christian Montegan, thank you very much for your time.
Good evening. And also, by the way, is it nearing my 100th episode? Or
let me do a quick tally, shall I? I think you're still a couple away.
I feel I'm pretty close.
88.
88 or 12 to go. Okay.
Or 89 as of tonight, actually. Sorry.
Okay, I'm going to need to get the cricket bat ready. I'm going to Rebel Sport, get a quick $5, one of those miniature cricket bats, and replicate Jacob's famous celebration.
And leave it in your lap for the entire episode.
The entire episode, it has to be there.
Incredible. Just kept it secretive.
All right, well done. I'm looking forward to it. Jacob Stevens, thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucky.
All right, thank you everyone for listening at home. We do appreciate your company. We will be back next week on Tuesday to recap the Australia Cup final and looking ahead, because it's the second week of Asian football as well. So look forward to that. But thank you again for listening. Goodbye.